to see the selflessness impermanence of all things, to let things go. The doctrine of no-self has two main characteristics: selflessness of things, dharmanairatmya, and selflessness of person, pudgalanairatmya. Sometimes, the teaching of not-self causes confusion and misunderstanding. Anytime we speak, we do say, "I am speaking," or "I am talking." How can we deny the reality of that I? Sincere Buddhists should always remember that the Buddha never asked us to reject the use of the name or term I. The Buddha himself still used a word, tathagata, to refer to himself. No matter what is the meaning of the word, it is still a word or a name. When the Buddha taught about not-self, he stressed on the rejection of the idea that this name or term I stands for a substantial, permanent, and changeless reality. The Buddha said that the five aggregates form feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness were not the self, and that the self was not to be found in them. The Buddha's rejection of the self is a rejection of the belief in a real, independent, permanent entity that is represented by the name or term I. For such a permanent entity would have to be independent, permanent, immutable, and impervious to change. But such a permanent entity or such a self is nowhere to be found. When Sakyamuni Buddha put forth the notion of no self, he upsets many concepts about life in the universe. He blasted our most firm and widespread conviction, that of a permanent self. Those who understand not self know that its function is to overthrow self, not to replace it with a new concept of reality. The notion of not self is a method, not a goal. If it becomes a concept, it must be destroyed along with all other concepts. Practitioners should always remember about the no-self of body-mind environment. No-self means that there is no self, no permanent nature per se, and that we are not true masters of ourselves. This point, too, is divided into the no-self body, the no-self mind, and the no-self environment. The no-self body means that this body is illusory, not its own master. It cannot be kept eternally young, or prevented from decaying and dying. Even gods and immortals can only postpone death for a certain period of time. The no-self of mind refers to the deluded mind of sentient beings, which has no permanent nature. For example, the mind of greed, thoughts of sadness, anger, love, and happiness suddenly arise and then disappear. There is nothing real. No self of environment means that our surroundings are illusory, passive, and subject to birth and decay. Cities and towns are in time replaced by abandoned mounds. Mulberry fields soon give way to the open seas. Every single thing changes and fluctuates by the second. One landscape disappears and another takes its place. The Buddha used the following analysis to prove that the self is nowhere to be found, either in the body or the mind. The body is not the self, for if the body were the self would be impermanent, would be subject to change, decay, destruction, and death. Hence the body cannot be the self. The self does not possess the body, in the sense that I possess a car or a television, because the self cannot control the body. The body falls ill, gets tired and old against our wishes. The body has an appearance which often does not agree with our wishes. Hence in no way does the self possess the body. The self does not exist in the body. If we search our bodies from top to bottom, we can find nowhere locate the so-called self. The self is not in the bone, or in the blood, in the marrow or in the hair, or spittle. The self is nowhere to be found within the body. The body does not exist in the self. For the body to exist in the self would have to be found apart from the body and mind. But the self is nowhere to be found. The mind is not the self because, like the body, the mind is subject to constant change, and is agitated like a monkey. The mind is happy one moment, and unhappy the next. Hence the mind is not the self, because the mind is constantly changing. The self does not possess the mind, because the mind becomes excited, or depressed against our wishes. Although we know that certain thoughts are wholesome, and certain thoughts unwholesome, the mind pursues unwholesome thoughts, and is different toward wholesome thoughts. Hence the self does not possess the mind because the mind acts independently of the self. The self does not exist in the mind, no matter how carefully we search the contents of our minds, no matter how we search our feelings, ideas, and inclinations. We can nowhere find the self in the mind and the mental states. The mind does not exist in the self because, again, the self would have to exist apart from the mind and body. But such a self is nowhere to be found. We should reject the idea of a self for two reasons. As long as we still cling to the self, we will always have to defend ourselves, our property, our prestige, opinions, and even our words. But once we give up the belief in an independent and permanent self, we will be able to live with everyone in peace and pleasure. The Buddha taught, understanding not self is a key to great enlightenment, for the belief in a self is synonymous with ignorance, and ignorance is the most basic of the three afflictions: greed, anger, and stupidity. Once we identify, imagine, or conceive ourselves as an entity, we immediately create a schism, a separation between ourselves and the people and things around us. Once we have this conception of self, we respond to the people and things around us with either attachment or aversion. That's the real danger of the belief of a self. Thus, the rejection of the self is not only the key of the end of sufferings and afflictions, but it is also a key to the entrance of the great enlightenment. Zen practitioners should contemplate no self in every step. Zen practitioners can comprehend these three characteristics by observing closely the mere lifting of the foot and the awareness of the lifting of the foot. By paying close attention to the movements, we see things arising and disappearing, and consequently we see for ourselves the impermanent, unsatisfactory, and non-self nature of all conditioned phenomena. Meanwhile, impermanence, anitya, is the state of not being permanent, of lasting or existing only for a short time, of changing continually. Physical changes operating from the state of formation to that of development. Decay and disintegration are exact manifestations of the law of transformation. All things in the universe, from the small grain of sand, the human body, to the big ones such as the earth, moon and sun, are governed by the Ave law, and as such, must come through these four periods. This process of changes characterizes impermanence. Anitya is one of the three, fundamental of everything existing: impermanence, anitya; suffering, dukkha; and non-ego, anatman. To understand thoroughly the impermanence of all things, Zen practitioners should contemplate that all things in this world, including human life, mountains, rivers, and political systems, are constantly changing from moment to moment. This is called impermanence in each moment. Everything passes through a period of birth, maturity, transformation, and destruction. This destruction is called impermanence in each cycle. To see the impermanent nature of all things, we must examine this closely. Doing so will help us let go, and at the same time to prevent us from being imprisoned by the things of this world. Buddhism teaches that human beings' bodies are composed of 5 aggregates, called skandhas in Sanskrit. If the form created by the 4 elements is empty and without self, then human beings' bodies created by the unification of the five skandhas, must also be empty and without self. Human beings' bodies are involved in a transformation process, from second to second, minute to minute, continually experiencing impermanence in each moment. By looking very deeply into the five skandhas, we can experience the selfless nature of our bodies, our passage through birth and death, and emptiness, thereby destroying the illusion that our bodies are permanent. In Buddhism, no self is the most important subject for meditation. By meditating no self, we can break through the barrier between self and other, when we no longer are separate from the universe. A completely harmonious existence with the universe is created. We see that all other human beings exist in us, and that we exist in all other human beings. We see that the past and the future are contained in the present moment, and we can penetrate and be completely liberated from the cycle of birth and death. In short, once Buddhist practitioners see the selflessness and impermanence of all things also means we push away great obstacles of attachments and begin to advance on the very important steps of letting go on our own path of cultivation.